Part 101. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1006. Boom. First, 4 self-destruction trucks carried bombs and exploded, destroying the base. Later, these 6 self-destruction trucks were added, adding an even more ferocious explosion. The violent shockwave spread, instantly destroying nearly 70% of the base. All the buildings were blown up, even the command post was not spared. Oh! Oh ho! Boom! Boom! This is not over yet. After the explosion, large areas of lethal radiation layers remained in the entire base, which continued to cause damage to the remaining troops for a period of time. Even the surviving infantry were transformed one after another because of this radiation layer. Because of the thick water, tanks and armored vehicles even exploded one after another. These 10 self-destructing trucks nearly destroyed the entire Allied base. Whoosh! Boom! Whoosh! Boom! However, after these 10 self-destructing trucks, there is still one most dangerous existence, Wangling. Maintaining the form of a terrestrial death god, Wangling is now immune to all attacks. The power of the 10 self-destructing trucks did not affect him at all. Instead, he seized the opportunity. After the explosion, the radiation layer did not have time to disappear, and he quickly touched up the damage. Under the movement through time and space, important remaining buildings were destroyed one after another. The rare surviving airports and combat laboratories were all blown up by it, and even 5 or 6 power plants were blown up. After a large number of main buildings exploded, Wangling picked up his rifle and blasted all the tanks and armored vehicles within his range with one sweep. This process is complicated to describe, but in fact Wangling acted very quickly. After all his attacks were completed, the radiation layer of the 10 self-destructing trucks had just disappeared, and the Iron Curtain device still had 20 many seconds. Whoosh! Wangling did not waste this time. There were 2 Allied bases in District 11, and the other one would not be spared. Taking advantage of the invincible moment, Wangling finished conquering this base and immediately broke into the next Allied base. This base was not affected by the previous explosion, and there was still a black area. However, Wangling was not afraid at all and settled in forcefully. As a result, he happened to land in a large group of soldiers. Ah! Ah! Wangling! This move really frightened the group of infantrymen. A large number of people screamed in fear and tried their best to stay away from here. However, there were also some soldiers, tanks, and defensive buildings who did not believe in evil, trying to kill Wangling, but all the attacks that fell on Wangling were blocked by the protective shield. Buzz! Oh! Oh ho! Boom! 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 Just as the light prism tower was about to launch the second round of light prism rays, Wangling had already ended his freezing time. With a focus on his eyes, he released a high-intensity mental shockwave as a greeting gift. All the infantry around him exploded in an instant. Even multifunctional infantry vehicles, remote-controlled tanks, prism tanks, and phantom tanks were unable to withstand such an impact. As long as they were in the inner area, they all exploded. Even the Grizzly tank and battle fortress were affected and suffered varying degrees of damage. Run! He is a god of death, run away! In the shadow of the famous tree, Wangling's name has resounded throughout the Allied forces. Ordinary Allied soldiers are intimidated when they see Wangling. And now Wangling has entered their base in the form of a terrestrial god of death. Can he not scare them? This round of bombardment alone nearly killed half of the soldiers in the base. The strong posture made the remaining infantry terrified. They lost all will to fight and only thought about fleeing. Buzz! Just as Wangling released a shockwave attack in Area 11, the Allied forces headquarters became restless. In response to the Allied forces' previous lightning storm, at this moment, under the command of PoortoRich, a nuclear bomb attack also followed. Start it. The huge nuclear warhead had left the nuclear bomb silo at this moment. After flying in the air for a short time, it had already broken into the Allied front line positions. However, the nuclear warhead did not explode towards District 11. Instead, it flew to District 12 next door and settled in the only Allied base there. Boom! At this moment, an extremely large mushroom cloud rose into the sky, and the billowing shockwave spread to most of the Allied base in an instant, causing the death of a large number of infantry tanks, and even a large number of buildings bursting. Like the coalition forces, the Allies also have force field shields to specifically resist super weapons. The moment the nuclear bomb fell, the base command post and several nearby buildings were shrouded in a layer of shields, draining the base's power. Moreover, because the nuclear bomb explosion destroyed a large number of power plants, the power of this base may not be restored for a long time. Buzz buzz. On the other side, Wang Ling's fierce attack continued. After the powerful mental shockwave, Wang Ling immediately used mind control. 3 battle fortresses came into his hands in succession. An instant rebellion led to the remaining 2 battle fortresses, defense buildings, and armored units in the surrounding area concentrated fire and attacked. Da-da-da-da-da. Boom boom boom. But Wang Ling also fought back, raising his rifle and firing quickly clearing the surrounding tanks, blowing up the remaining battle fortresses, and quickly blowing up 3 power plants, interrupting the base's power supply. At this time, there was only the last one left in the controlled battle fortress. But this was enough. Under Wang Ling's instant order, the battle fortress rushed straight towards the command post. During this period, Wang Ling was not idle, blowing up several power plants one after another, sweeping away killed a large number of troops. In order to deal with Wang Ling's terrestrial death form, the Allies did put some effort into building 3 consecutive layers of walls around the command post. If Wang Ling was allowed to demolish it by himself, it would indeed be a waste of too much time. However, the battle fortress had no scruples at all. After approaching the command post, it rolled over directly. Wherever it passed, all the walls were crushed and dismantled, and crossing the wall was like walking on flat ground. Whoosh! Boom! When the last layer of the wall was crushed, Wang Ling was even more rude and moved directly through time and space. A bomb blew up the entire command post and wiped out the exposed working soldiers. Now, the base is out of power, and even the command post has been blown up. This base is already more than half finished. But, whoosh! Boom! Whoosh! Boom! Da-da-da-da-da. Wang Ling still did not let go of the remaining troops. With a few time travel movements, he blasted the remaining main buildings and swept all the Allied troops with full firepower. Even though he is just one person, his powerful firepower is no weaker than that of the Allied troops combined, and he is also protected by the Iron Curtain device. The title of Land Reaper is not just for nothing. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1007. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh. Oh ho. Boom. 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 The raging was still going on. Relying on the protection of the Iron Curtain device, when Wang Ling opened up his firepower, he simply ignored the enemy's firepower and fired with all his heart. He wiped out the remaining infantry in batches, even the tanks. Armored vehicles also exploded one after another, and a large number of buildings collapsed one after another. When Wang Ling fought against the Mind Empire before, just one round of Iron Curtain device was enough to blow up the command posts of all Yuri bases in the entire war zone, leaving some time to destroy them. But now, the entire Iron Curtain device time is only focused on the 2 Allied bases in District 11. Of course, there is a lot of time, not to mention the assistance of 10 self-destructing trucks. This time was enough for him to destroy 2 Allied bases by himself. Boom! Boom! and Wang Ling did not show mercy. During this invincible time, he was really like a god of death, destroying all the troops and buildings within reach of the entire base. The terrifying destructive power and combat effectiveness were shocking to the Allies. The military was all frightened. They were indeed paying extra attention to Wang Ling, knowing how terrifying Wang Ling was, but when the land god of death actually visited the Allied base and started destroying it, they realized that they had still underestimated this god of death. Buzz. After destroying more than 80% of the buildings and troops in this Allied base, Wang Ling's Iron Curtain device time finally ended, and the black protective layer gradually faded and disappeared. However, after being hit by this blow, even without the Iron Curtain device, the remaining poor Allied troops did not dare to challenge Wang Ling at all. They were all trembling with fear, with only thoughts of escape and survival in their minds. Whoosh! However, Wang Ling did not chase them. Instead, he moved through time and space and left the Allied base. Is he returning to his home base? No, after destroying two major Allied bases one after another, Wang Ling still didn't give up. Now, thanks to the movement through time and space, he left Area 11 and headed towards the Allied base in Area 12. Yes, the Allied base in District 12 has just been visited by a nuclear bomb attack, and the base's combat effectiveness and defensive strength have been greatly damaged. If we don't add insult to injury at this time, do we still have to wait for them to recover? Although District 11 and District 12 are adjacent areas, in fact because the map is too large, the distance between the two areas is not very close. Even with Wang Ling's time and space movement, it also takes more than 10 seconds of stiff time to travel between the two places. However, Wang Ling did not dare to shuttle directly to the enemy base in one go. He was still tossing and turning in the middle of the way, getting closer and closer to the 12th district. In Area 12, the Allied base has just been hit by a nuclear bomb attack and has not yet recovered. Even the nuclear radiation layer in the base has not completely disappeared. The surviving infantry tanks everywhere are hiding. How do you know that a more terrifying god of death is approaching here? Oh! Oh ho! Boom! Boom! Under the terrifying radiation layer, infantrymen would be turned into thick water from time to time, and light armored tanks and vehicles with residual health would explode. The entire base was in a sense of post-disaster fear. Buzz! In fear, the force field shield of the command post has also disappeared. However, because a large area of power plants was destroyed by the explosion, the base is still in a power outage state, and its defense strength is greatly reduced. Finally, after a period of time, the terrifying radiation layer gradually disappeared, and the surviving infantrymen were all terrified. Whoosh! However, before they could finish breathing, Wang Ling suddenly broke into the empty area that was blasted out of the base, raised his gun and started shooting. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh! Oh ho! Boom! Boom! Under the suppression of this powerful firepower, the infantrymen who were still thankful to have survived were met with disaster again before they could recover. They fell down in rows and rows, and even the surrounding tanks and vehicles fell one after another. Vehicles exploded with such frequency that they were like setting off firecrackers. Buzzing. However, not long after he wreaked havoc, more than 30 rocket pilots in the air recovered and hurriedly rushed towards Wang Ling. Now Wang Ling did not have an Iron Curtain device by his side. No matter how strong his body was, he would die if he was attacked too hard. This group of rocket pilots saw this opportunity and tried to take advantage of it to kill Wang Ling. But, is it so easy? Whoosh! Boom, boom, boom. Just when these rocket pilots had just approached Wang Ling and were about to fire, Wang Ling suddenly moved backward in time and space, avoiding the range of these rocket pilots, and then raised the barrel of the gun and unleashed a fierce blast. Although the rocket pilot is an air force, Fan Tao is still an infantryman and is very afraid of the coalition's anti-aircraft artillery. The firepower of Wang Ling's King-level air defense infantry was equivalent to the combined firepower of 5 or 6 elite air defense tracked vehicles. Under the counterattack, how could those rocket pilots be able to withstand it? They fell in batches. Even faster than dumplings. Carrying this amount of firepower, the remaining rocket pilots still tried to get close to Wang Ling, but Wang Ling once again ran back a certain distance and continued to stay outside its range to bombard. In the end, these rocket pilots failed to hit Wang Ling at all. Even if Ling fired one cannon, he would kill them all by himself. With the skills of the Chrono Legionnaires at their side, the Allies have now missed the best opportunity to kill Wang Ling and have become the god of killing in the climate. How can they be killed so easily? Buzzing. While the rocket pilots were stalling for time, the remaining armored units of the Allied base quickly approached Wang Ling, trying to focus their fire on the attack. However, while Wang Ling released his mind control and controlled 3 battle fortresses in the blink of an eye, causing chaos within the Allied armored forces, he also used his rifle to shoot rapidly. The front foot of this Allied base had just been hit by a nuclear bomb attack. It was weak and was attacked by Wang Ling. The remaining troops were unable to deal with Wang Ling for a while. They were quickly defeated under the attack from the front and rear. Whoosh! Boom! Whoosh! Boom! After defeating the guard, Wang Ling became even more unscrupulous and acted quickly, blowing up buildings one after another. Originally, if the Allied base had a power supply, Wang Ling would not have dared to be so unscrupulous. However, without power, the Allied base was like a tiger with its teeth pulled out. Wang Ling did not take it to heart at all. One building after another exploded, and it was impossible for Wang Ling to take it seriously. No capable person or defensive building can stop Wang Ling. The original defense in this base was still very strong. There were even 2 giant cannons in the base, but there was no electricity. This was ridiculous. After all the power plants exploded, the giant cannons and light prism towers were also dismantled, and the machine guns. Although the bunker had counter-attack firepower, Wang Ling moved too quickly and was dismantled before it could fire for long. Wang Ling was only slightly injured, which was far from affecting the combat effectiveness. After all the defensive buildings were dismantled, Wang Ling went even more crazy, destroying most of the main buildings in the base, and then began to hunt down the remaining Allied troops with one man's power. Finally, he used the Beast King form to destroy the wall and blow it up. After reaching the command post, this attack is truly over. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1008. Previously, the Allied forces used super weapons one after another against Wang Ling's infantry, successfully killing more than 200 people and destroying a large number of buildings. At that time, Wang Ling threatened to make the Allies pay 10 times and 100 times the price, and now, he has indeed done it. Although the Alliance's 2 major super weapons were used to assist, this round of attacks alone wiped out 3 Allied bases in succession. There were literally thousands of enemy infantry killed in this attack, and there were a large number of them. Armored troops, as well as 3 bases with numerous buildings, as well as 3 command posts and 3 commanders. How could this loss be compared to the more than 200 infantrymen under Wang Ling's command? Call. However, for Wang Ling, the 2 were completely incomparable. How could the 3 Allied bases compare to his own soldiers? After the attack ended, Wang Ling did not return immediately. Staying in the ruins of the Allied base, Wang Ling took a deep breath and looked at the dilapidated battle traces around him. There was no pity in his heart, only anger. And this flame, after continuing to burn for a while, finally gradually faded away. Wang Ling also gradually regained his composure, raised his head and glanced at the sky, then slowly raised his right hand, showing a very ironic middle finger. Indeed, because of his experience in uniting against the Seoul Empire, Wang Ling actually did not have a strong fighting spirit towards the Allies, and was even a little nostalgic and did not want to fight. However, as Coach Rich said before, the Allies have their guns pointed at their own noses, so how can there be no reason not to fight? What's more, the first round of the Allied offensive hit him on the head, extending the butcher knife to the heads of his soldiers, stepping on Wang Ling's red line. What's the point of all the cooperation in the past? General Bob, look, he despises us. Damn, that's so arrogant. Are you arrogant? He really has the capital to be arrogant. I don't deny this, but Wang Ling is too ruthless. He destroyed 3 of our bases in one attack. 3 bases in total. What a terrifying opponent, even more terrifying than we thought before. Do we have to face this kind of opponent? After all, there is global electronic map technology. Even if the base in Area 12 is destroyed, there will still be electronic maps and electronic videos. The Allies have actually been paying attention to Wang Ling. This last middle finger was naturally taken by the Allied commander-in-chief. The generals saw this, and they were all shocked and angry. General Bob's face was also a little dark. He hadn't had this expression for a long time since he traveled through time and space with the coalition forces. After the other generals complained, General Bob clenched his fists and said, "Wang Ling is indeed very strong, a greater threat than the Seoul Empire. However, since we have decided to start a war with such a powerful enemy, we have to face it." Agent Tanya is also in the general command post, and judging from the epaulets, she has reached the level of lieutenant general, the same level as Wang Ling. After listening to General Bob's words, Agent Tanya couldn't help but speak, "General, we don't have to face such a powerful enemy, why do we have to fight this battle for hegemony?" This kind of questioning is indeed a bit inappropriate. I am afraid that General Bob will be angry before he can do it again. But this time, General Bob rarely cared about it, and even sighed, "I don't want to take such a big risk and fight this war for hegemony again, but the old immortals above are unwilling to give up the benefits and want to monopolize the world. Resources, to dominate the world, and we cannot disobey their orders." Tanya was speechless for a moment. After sighing, General Bob regained his former majesty and snorted coldly, "Now that the war has begun, we can't reminisce about the old friendship, otherwise we will be the ones who die. Wang Ling's threat is great, but in the past few days, didn't we also have a plan? This time we attacked his base and targeted his men. Although the price we paid was higher than we thought, we still forced him out. Next time, we will let him leave completely this world." It turned out that the Allies had guessed what the Allies were thinking before the war started, and did not want to use Wang Ling easily. After all, such combat power could not be lost. Previously, super weapons were used to attack Wang Ling's base, and even focused on killing Wang Ling's men. The purpose was to anger Wang Ling so that he would show up and implement the next plan. After all, they had cooperated for so long, and they knew Wang Ling's combat effectiveness. With such a pervert guarding the coalition forces had no chance of winning. They had to set up a trap in advance to kill Wang Ling. However, Agent Tanya seemed hesitant. "Are we really going to do this? Will he take the bait?" "Don't worry. Since we are hostile and have angered him, we don't have to worry about him not taking the bait." At the ruins of the Allied base in District 12, Wang Ling did not expect that this was a trap set by the Allied forces against him. He destroyed 3 Allied bases in a row and vented his anger. After feeling contempt, Wang Ling walked on the return trip. However, he did not return to the base directly. Instead, he picked up the 2 crazy Ivans who planted the bomb halfway and sent them to the original base before setting off to return. As for his achievements, the coalition generals who were familiar with his combat effectiveness did not find it strange, but many people used this to defeat the Allied forces. Wanling's Land Reaper form can break into the headquarters of the Mind Empire alone to carry out beheading operations. Do the Allies think they can resist with a little cleverness? However, what the Allies did afterwards slapped many coalition generals in the face. The Allies were so hurt by Wanling's attack that they were so frightened by Wanling's terrestrial death attitude that they voluntarily gave up the super weapon operation and dismantled the weather control device and super weapon. The time and space teleporter and the countdown of these two super weapons on the electronic map also ended. In response, the coalition forces could only give up the super weapon and seal the two major buildings. There is no way, this is not only the rule of the game, but also the consensus on the battlefield of Red Alert World. If one side gives up super weapons, the other side cannot use it easily. Otherwise, this battle for hegemony will escalate into a battle of annihilation, with very tragic consequences. As a result, without the assistance of the Iron Curtain device, Wanling's Land Reaper form can no longer be used. This sacrifice was so shrewd that it made a group of coalition generals feel bad. Of course, the abandonment of super weapons has certainly reduced the intensity of this battlefield, but war is war, and even without the existence of super weapons, it is still just as cruel. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1009. The battle for hegemony is still going on. I don't know if it was because of the pain caused by Wanling's attack. After the super weapon was disassembled, the Allied forces did not rush to take revenge. Instead, they uncharacteristically stood still and refused to send troops to attack the Allied positions. Instead, it was the coalition positions that sent out small-scale harassment troops several times in succession, but they were forcibly intercepted and defeated midway. This situation has gone beyond Wanling's awareness. During the game, even ruthless enemies would send large numbers of troops to attack from time to time, but what are the Allies doing now? Abnormalities lead to monsters. Even though the Allied base seems to be standing still on the surface, the coalition forces have no idea what big moves they are making in the dark area. Under this unknown situation, the coalition forces did not dare to send too many troops to attack. On the one hand, they expanded the base, and on the other hand, they collectively sent out reconnaissance planes to try to detect the Allied forces in this black area. However, the Allies seemed to have a guilty conscience. Before the reconnaissance plane approached this dark area, dozens of rocket pilots broke out from the corresponding base in advance and intercepted the reconnaissance plane. This action made the coalition even more suspicious. In fact, when the war for hegemony resumed, many generals of the coalition forces looked down on the Allies in their hearts. Not to mention that the coalition forces themselves were not weak, and the Allies had to weigh the threat of Wanling alone. However, during the confrontation during the war, the Allies made such moves, which made them confused. Not daring to keep the Allies prepared like this, the two Allied bases in Area 2 joined forces and launched a medium-sized attack on the Allied positions. During the attack, these troops really broke into the black area of the corresponding Allied base. After exploring, many Allied generals could not calm down. It turns out that the Allied forces were standing still during these days and were indeed preparing a large number of large troops. In the black area, there were dozens of light tanks piled up, and even many auxiliary tanks, and more than 10 battle fortresses. Watching with eager eyes. If this kind of armored force attacks the coalition base, it will be very difficult to defend. Of course, what is most unacceptable to the coalition forces is the target in the air. Traces of laser UFOs appeared above the coalition base. Laser UFO? How could it be? Laser UFO is the technology of the Soul Empire. How could the Allies master it? Damn it, when did the Allies trick us like this? When did they take control? A group of generals were shocked. During the battle with the Mind Empire, this kind of flying saucer impressed them too deeply. The Allies are not weak in the first place, but now with the addition of laser UFO units, isn't the threat even greater? At the coalition headquarters, in the general command post, Coach Rich stared at the battle situation on the electronic video, his nails almost digging into his flesh under his clenched fists. This attack, the coalition forces did not expect to pose much of a threat to the Allied forces. Under the attack, they only annihilated part of the Allied forces, and were crushed by the subsequent batches of light prism rays. The area filled up again, covering the armored troops and the laser UFOs in the sky. After watching this battle, Coach Rich's face couldn't help but look a little gloomy. As the commander, Coach Rich is much more sensitive than other generals. He closed his eyes and thought carefully for a long time, and finally got the answer: it's Einstein. Einstein. A group of confused generals in the rear were still puzzled. Coach Rich explained, after much thought, only Einstein had the ability and the opportunity to hand over the laser UFO technology to the Allies. But Coach, isn't Einstein dead? He is indeed dead, but don't forget that the day before the time travel, he handed over the global electronic map technology to our two armies. I was actually wondering at the time why he didn't give us a copy of the global electronic map technology for our two armies. Copy it yourself, but give one copy separately. Now it seems that the gift he gave Bob at that time probably contained laser UFO technology. This little old man was captured by the Mind Empire. With his cleverness, it is not difficult to steal the laser UFO technology and carry it out secretly. What an Einstein! I was quite grateful to him before, but I didn't expect this guy to be so insidious. Did the Allies intend to restart the war for hegemony at that time? After listening to Coach Rich's analysis, the generals behind him were all filled with indignation. However, Coach Rich sighed and interrupted everyone: there is no need to be so angry. Although Einstein is a neutral scientist, the country he lives in is in the Allied camp after all. He is both emotional and rational. We should be more biased toward the Allies. Science has no borders, but scientists do, and that is understandable. And we are not qualified to hate him. After all, we can return smoothly, and Einstein does deserve the most credit. Alas, even though I have said that, I still feel dissatisfied. Originally, we had a great advantage against the Allies, but with the addition of this laser UFO, the battle for hegemony will be a bit difficult. Don't be so depressed. The Allies are difficult to deal with, but we also have a trump card. Yes, it's not certain who will win or lose. Coach Rich's conjecture was not made clear to the front line. After all, even if they knew the source of the laser UFO, it would be of little significance to them. At the moment, the most important thing was to devote themselves to the battle for hegemony. As for the Allies, after having the experience of cooperating with the coalition forces to fight against the Mind Empire, their strategic play has also made significant changes. For example, in the current battle for hegemony, at the beginning of the war, General William proposed an extreme strategy: as quiet as a virgin and as active as a rabbit. During the confrontation, they will not send any troops to harass the coalition forces, but relying on the crack generator, they will quickly create siege weapons in the dark area. When the stockpile reaches a certain standard, they will then focus on launching a fierce attack. Already, a blockbuster. Originally, for the sake of safety, the number of attacking troops should be larger, but the coalition forces have ascertained their lineup in advance. If it continues, the corresponding arms and defense forces may be deployed in the coalition base. As a last resort, after defeating the attacking force, the Allies did not dare to wait too long. Then 8 bases were dispatched, and a large number of armored forces were dispatched. Each base had a 20 to 30 Prism tanks, more than 10 Phantom tanks, more than 10 Grizzly tanks, more than 10 battle fortresses filled with heavily armed soldiers, and 10 to 20 laser UFOs. This lineup looks like a decisive battle, as if it is going to wipe out all the coalition positions at once. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1010. Emergency. Quick, all bases, cheer up and defend with all your strength. When he saw the Allied offensive lineup on the electronic map, PoortoRich was also startled and quickly warned all the commanders on the front line. And how can these commanders dare to slack off? After being frightened, I was already seizing the time to set up temporary defenses. There are 8 Allied bases, and the total number of dispatched lineups is about 200 Prism tanks, as well as various auxiliary tanks and vehicles, and more than 100 laser UFOs circling. This kind of offensive, even Wang Ling don't even dare to contact us directly, let alone other bases. Looking at the front line positions, almost all coalition bases have prepared a large number of armed helicopters, Apocalypse tanks, and Rhino tanks. There are also batches of anti-aircraft crawlers and anti-aircraft infantry in the rear. There are also batches of recently trained rocket pilots in the air, stacked at the front, ready for battle. Fortunately, among the misfortunes, these 8 Allied bases were not gathered together, but came from districts 1, 3, 4, 6, 14, 16, 18, and 19, with the strength of more dispersed. However, it is precisely because of this dispersion that it is even more difficult to guess their offensive goals. After all, this is not a previous encounter. With the help of the global electronic map, they can completely attack the bases in other districts, just like Wang Ling attacked the 12th district before. Under such uncertain factors, almost every base of the coalition forces is in danger, and they can only do their best to defend themselves. For a while, they are unable to send troops to support other bases. And this seems to be what the Allies expected. The routes of the attacking troops in the 8 Allied bases were also twisted and twisted, making it impossible to see their goals. The last moment they were heading towards the bases in this area. But the next moment he changed his route and ran to the next area, which made many generals of the coalition feel itchy in their teeth. The global electronic map zoomed in on the entire battlefield. The two positions were very far apart, but no matter how far away there was always a distance limit. 8 Allied bases sent troops, and relying on the speed of the armored forces, after half a day, they finally gradually approached the coalition forces. Battlefront. At this time, something surprising happened. I thought that each of the 8 bases' troops would be responsible for attacking a coalition base. However, I didn't expect that before the attack, these 8 troops actually began to gather. Every 4 the troops gathered into one, concentrated their firepower, and attacked the 2 districts closest to them with all their strength. Damn it, I've been fooled. Quick, send reinforcements to the 5th area immediately. District 16 is in danger. Quick, send troops for support. Are these bastards treating us like monkeys? At this point, how could the coalition commanders still not know the purpose of the Allied offensive? At that moment, most of the commanders there were yelling in anger, and the commanders of nearby areas and bases hurriedly sent reinforcements to the 2 areas. However, due to mental arithmetic or not, the Allies' attack speed was faster. Before the reinforcements arrived, these 2 large forces had already arrived at the periphery of the base in the corresponding area and began a strong attack. Dong 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 dong. Boom. 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 Swish swish swish. Boom boom boom. The armed helicopters stationed on the periphery of areas 5 and 16 launched cannon bombardments from a very long distance. The first round of bombardment destroyed more than 10 light prism tanks each. However, before the next round of bombardment started, the Grizzly tanks and battle fortresses in the Allied forces pushed forward, attracting the firepower of all the armed helicopters. At the cost of more than 20 gunships exploding, they approached the Allied forces' position and launched concentrated firepower. He launched a missile attack and bombarded the armed helicopters that were deployed. Despite the ferocious gunfire of the armed helicopters, the defense is actually not too strong in the deployed state. In addition, the missiles of the heavily armored soldiers are very powerful against armored troops. The fierce attack after getting close can really impact the defense layer. It's not easy. In the midst of the chaos, the main offensive force, the light prism tanks, also came closer and fired light prism rays in batches. There are also a lot of coalition guards, but these guards have become the best carriers for the connection of light prism rays. Dozens of light prism tanks blasted one after another. The light hit the guard group and formed various combinations when connected with each other. Complex patterns. Although this pattern looks beautiful, it also carries a fatal danger. A large number of armed helicopters exploded one after another. Even Rhino tanks and Apocalypse tanks were bombarded. Dozens of connections were made, covering a large area. Lose blood. Buzz buzz. While the battlefield on the ground was being fierce, the situation in the air did not stop, and the batches of laser UFOs also followed closely behind, circling. Dong 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 dong. The anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and anti-aircraft infantry on standby behind the coalition base immediately locked onto these targets and began to concentrate fire and artillery bombardment. The rumbling sound was deafening, and was also mixed with the shooting sound of a large number of rocket pilots. Swish swish swish. Swish 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 swish. However, the group of laser UFOs did not fight back immediately. Instead, they concentrated their fire and killed the remaining armed helicopters. Then they destroyed all the rocket pilots, and killed a few Apocalypse tanks by the way. Finally, they faced off against the army of anti-aircraft crawlers. Stand up. Swish, swish, swish. Swish, swish, swish. Boom. On the ground battlefield, the Apocalypse tank army could not hold back and did not defend its position all the time. All the Apocalypse tanks and the Rhino tanks rushed forward together, trying to quickly close the distance and bombard the Prism tanks. However, the offensive of these light Prism tanks is also very fierce. They are bombarded by a large number of light prism rays all the time. With the connection over a large area, many tanks are blinded and their speed is seriously hindered. Taking advantage of this opportunity, those battle fortresses suddenly launched an attack, launching missile attacks in unison, and lined up in a row, crushing them like a wall. Wang Ling has been jealous of units like Battle Fortress since they first appeared. That is not unreasonable. Not only can they crush walls, but they can also crush tanks, and the Apocalypse tank is no exception. As a result, under this round of fierce crushing, the Apocalypse tank army exploded in rows. In a few breaths, more than 20 tanks were crushed, and the loss was simply over 60%. Despite this loss, the remaining Apocalypse tanks and Rhino tanks successfully tore a huge gap in the Battle Fortress lineup. However, before they could counterattack, the Grizzly tanks and Phantom tanks rushed up from behind. Bully. Further back, the darkest army of light tanks also focused on taking care of them. After several rounds of volleys, combined with the Battle Fortress and Grizzly tanks, these tank troops quickly withered. After destroying these tank troops, the light tank army was as unscrupulous as tigers descending from the mountain. Originally, the ground-to-air battle was still in full swing, and the winner could not be determined in a short time. However, the light tank army had already rushed in first. After several rounds, with a sweeping sweep, all anti-aircraft crawler vehicles were blasted. Smashing the outer lines of defense was like breaking the shield of the coalition base and exposing the chest. The Allied troops took advantage of this opportunity and directly launched a fierce attack, as if it were a sharp sword. Stab it up and launch the final extermination attack. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1011. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. Boom. 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 Oh. Oh ho. In fact, after the defeat of the peripheral armored forces, this coalition base had no hope of resistance. The Allied Prism tank army showed no mercy. A batch of Prism rays swept across, destroying everything in the base on a large scale. The coalition is indeed famous for its large number of infantry, but the infantry is looking for death against the army of light tanks, so the infantry of this coalition base always hides inside the base. However, the defense line collapsed, and the army of light Prism tanks filed in. This group of infantry had no protective umbrella. Under the bombardment of a large number of light Prism rays, they were killed in pieces, and they could not even get close. Not only the infantry, but other buildings are also within the target of bombardment. Relying on the ultra-long range, these light Prism tanks sweep across the coalition base with no disadvantages. By chance, they came across a few returning armed mining vehicles and tried to attack the army of light tanks. However, they were bombarded by long-range concentrated fire. Not only did they explode, but under the exaggerated connection, even the surrounding buildings were blasted in batches. Buzz. Originally, this situation had left the coalition base defenseless, but those laser UFOs took the opportunity to sneak behind the coalition base, adsorbing the nuclear reactor, and instantly cutting off the base's power. It was raining all night. Without the power supply, the coalition base had no remaining support. The Allied forces' Prism tank army took the opportunity to sweep across everything. Even the command post was under attack. The bottom exploded, and its commander didn't even have time to leave any last words. When a nuclear power plant explodes, it is very powerful, equivalent to a small nuclear bomb. However, the range of the Prism tank is too long, and the concentrated fire blasted the last building, but the range of the explosion failed to affect the Prism tank. In this battle, the coalition base was completely defeated. The entire base only consumed about 40% of the strength of the Allied offensive force. However, this is not because the Allied bases are not strong enough, but because the Allied forces are too insidious. After all, this offensive force is composed of 4 Allied bases, and the lineup is all elite armored forces of the Allied forces. How could it be stopped with the firepower of a coalition base? The battle in Area 16 ended like this. There was only one coalition base stationed in this area. When the Allied forces attacked, the coalition bases in the 2 nearby areas had sent air forces to support them, and they were still on the way. However, the Allied troops who attacked District 16 were not willing to fight. After breaking through the coalition base, they did not even stay and turned around and left. In the 5th area, the situation is a little different. There are 2 coalition bases stationed here, but the 2 bases are also far apart. When the Allied troops in District 16 retreated, the battle in District 5 had come to an end and a base had been successfully destroyed. However, they didn't have time to retreat. The reinforcements from another base had already bitten them and were delaying them. Reinforcements from the coalition bases in the 2 surrounding areas were about to arrive. This Allied force seemed to be helpless. The sun returned alive. As for the Allied troops in District 16, although their retreat speed was fast enough that the coalition reinforcements could not catch up, could they really leave alive? The answer is negative. Whoosh! Just as these troops were retreating at full speed, Chen Yaojin appeared on the way. Wang Ling appeared on their retreat route with 10 elite anti-aircraft crawlers and blocked them. Why are light Prism tanks such a threat? To put it bluntly, it's because of the super long range. However, the range of Wang Lingbing's King-level elite combat soldier is even higher than that of the light Prism tank. Coupled with its terrifying destructive power, it can be said that it is the powerful nemesis of the light Prism tank. The Allies also knew how terrifying Wang Ling was. Such a murderous god suddenly appeared on the road. The commander hurriedly issued orders to try to bypass Wang Ling and avoid conflict with him. But why is Wang Ling here? His mobility is far beyond that of this group of Allied troops. Just as he was about to go around the bend, Wang Ling already took the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle and took the initiative to move closer. He stopped outside the range of the light prism tank and raised his gun. Then beat him. Da-da-da-da-da. Boom. 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 An inch longer and an inch stronger is undoubtedly reflected at this time. The army of light tanks could raging across the coalition base before, but when it fell to Wang Ling, under his long-range shooting, one after another exploded, and none of them exploded. The prism tank can withstand Wang Ling's shots. The battle fortress couldn't stand it any longer, so it blocked the front along with the Phantom tank and Grizzly tank, gradually approaching Wang Ling. They are already on them, so you have to fight them even if you don't want to. But da-da-da-da-da. Boom. 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 This batch of Allied tanks and armored vehicles were not much better. At best, they lasted longer than the prism tanks. They were blasted by Wang Ling one after another before they could reach him. Damn it, Allies, come on. Do you really think you can do it now that you have the laser UFO? While shooting and crushing, Wang Ling was also provoking. This group of Allied troops had just destroyed the 16th District Coalition base, and Wang Ling was also furious. It was rare to rely on the battle fortress to block the gun. The follow-up light tank barely approached Wang Ling, but Wang Ling teleported away with an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and continued the previous attack. Buzz buzz. The laser UFOs in the sky also took the opportunity to attack. They charged in groups, but were concentratedly targeted by anti-aircraft crawler vehicles. Under the roar of cannons, 3 or 5 laser UFOs fell from time to time. Reluctantly approaching, he was about to open fire, but Wang Ling led a group of anti-aircraft crawlers out of range and hid in the distance to continue the attack. It's the same on the ground, and it's the same in the air. This group of Allied troops had just destroyed the coalition base, and they were in high spirits, but they caught up with a scoundrel like Wang Ling on the back. It was a grievance. In this battle, they couldn't fight at all. As soon as they got close, Wang Ling dodged them. He tried to get around them, but Wang Ling stuck to them like a piece of dogskin plaster. Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft crawlers were allowed to fire, but the Allied troops were not allowed to do so. As a result, the number of these Allied troops dropped sharply due to the continuous consumption, and they were finally completely consumed by Wang Ling. At the same time, the fighting in the 5th area has reached a fever pitch. The Allied forces are surrounded by enemies from both sides and are flanked by 3 coalition forces, most of which are air forces. No matter how strong their combat effectiveness is, they cannot withstand this kind of consumption. The war lasted for a long time and ended with the demise of the Allied forces, ending the battle. Now, all the attacking troops in the 8 Allied bases were killed, but this attack also destroyed 2 full Allied bases. Although the damage was not as serious as Wang Ling's, this attack also panicked the coalition forces. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1012. Son of a bitch allies. Damn it, do you really think that we are soft persimmons and can be pinched as much as we want? You bitch, I'm so frustrated. These bastards from the Allied forces are so shady. These bastards from the Allied forces are very skilled in using laser UFOs. It seems they have planned to trick us for a long time. The battle was temporarily over. Many coalition commanders were furious. Many people were cursing. There were even several commanders who were already planning a counterattack. As for the Allied forces, the commanders of several bases participating in the war gritted their teeth angrily, and were actually somewhat dissatisfied with the result. After all, with his 2 super weapons, Wang Ling was able to wipe out 3 of their bases in one attack. However, with the combined efforts of their 8 bases, they only killed 2 coalition bases, and the troops were annihilated before they could even come back alive. In the Allied General Headquarters, General Bob watched the whole battle, and now he was sighing, as expected of the coalition forces that have been fighting us for so long. The firepower is really strong. The ace armored forces from the 8 bases worked together, and they only killed even the last tank from the 2 coalition bases failed to return safely. This result is really unexpected. General Bob, there is actually no problem with the plan. Even if the coalition forces have detected our army's lineup and trump card in advance, they will not be able to withstand the rapid attack of the ace armored forces. On the side, General William analyzed calmly, look at the 2 coalition bases we conquered. Although they fought hard, they were rapidly collapsing under our attack. Even if one unit was killed by coalition reinforcements, they resisted desperately. They also paid a heavy price. But what makes me very dissatisfied is actually Wang Ling. The troops in that direction realized that the coalition reinforcements were approaching and decisively chose to retreat. They were very smart, but Wang Ling suddenly came out halfway. Destroyed all the armored units in the 4 ace bases without spending a single soldier. This combat power is simply the number one threat to our allies. General Bob snorted coldly, stared at Wang Ling who had returned to the base with his troops in the electronic video, gritted his teeth and said, with him here, we have almost no chance of winning in this battle for hegemony. William, success or failure depends on you. The annihilation plan is in place. As long as Wang Ling can be eliminated, we can win this war. Yes. It turned out that the plan against Wang Ling was also proposed by General William. It is sad to say that the proposal to unite the coalition forces to fight against the Seoul Empire was first proposed by General William within the Allied forces. During this period, General William did play a friendly role towards the coalition forces. However, after the 2 sides fell out and the war for hegemony resumed, he came up with several important strategies against the coalition forces. From this aspect, General William is indeed good at assessing the situation. It can be said that the coalition forces and the Allied forces are already old enemies. After the last alliance, they know each other well. The addition of the global electronic map changed the scale of the battlefield and intensified the process of the war. The 2 sides had long omitted the phase of testing each other and directly turned into a fierce confrontation. This action by the Allies has raised the confrontation between the 2 sides to a new peak. After suffering such a big loss, the coalition responded quickly. On the one hand, it strengthened the defense of the base and significantly expanded its armored forces. On the other hand, it also made every effort to plan a large-scale counterattack, which officially started the next day. Acts of revenge. Like the Allied forces, the coalition forces also had several bases working together to send out elite armored troops, followed by a large number of infantry teams, merging into 2 offensive forces. Wang Ling also personally led the Wolf Team and Dog Team to form the 3rd Offensive Force and launched a rapid offensive towards the Allied base. The 3-pronged force finally succeeded in annihilating 3 corresponding Allied bases. After breaking through the enemy's regional position, the Allied forces immediately arrived with a large number of reinforcements in an attempt to annihilate this group of coalition attacking troops. However, the firepower of Wang Ling's Wolf Group and Dog Group troops was too fierce and could not be resisted by the Allied reinforcements. Instead, they annihilated the incoming Allied troops. After breaking through, De Wan was spared and relied on his superiority. With his mobility, he crossed another front and saved the coalition forces here. As for the other coalition force, there was nothing Wang Ling could do. After all, the battlefields were too far apart and there was no way to rescue them. He could only watch them being surrounded and annihilated by the coalition forces from the electronic map. After this revenge attack, the coalition's offensive troops lost more than 1/3, and the Allies directly lost 3 bases. This was in sharp contrast to the Allied forces' previous record. This revenge simply hit the Allies' faces. It hurts. Subsequently, after the Allies recovered, they also dispatched ace armored units from several major bases and continued their previous practice. But this time the coalition forces learned a lesson, and sent troops to harass several bases in advance, disrupting the enemy forces before they could join together, causing a cholera attack on a large number of terrorist robots. Wang Ling even led his troops to completely destroy the armored units in 2 Allied bases. Of course, the ace armored forces of the Allies were not a vegetarian. Except for the 2 troops that Wang Ling destroyed, several other troops were disrupted and annihilated all the harassing troops. At the cost of total annihilation, the other troops were destroyed. 2 coalition bases. The battle between the 2 sides was just like this. You came and I went back and forth, making big moves. Every move was a fatal move, making this battle for hegemony extremely fierce. During the war, the troops of the 2 armies were naturally constantly replenished. The base that had just been lost on the front foot would have new bases and commanders arriving in a few days to stand at the forefront. This is true for the coalition forces, and it is the same for the Allied forces. The Allied forces corresponding to Wang Ling's District 11 had also dispatched a base vehicle and a group of Allied troops in an attempt to establish a brand new base to fight against the coalition forces. But Wang Ling didn't give them this chance at all. He directly led a group of elite apocalypse tanks to kill them through time travel movement, and wiped out all the Allied bases before they were rebuilt. After suffering the pain, the Allies stopped sending bases to Area 11 for a while. After all, whenever a base approached, Wang Ling would go and destroy it, so there was no need for the Allies to make this unpleasant for themselves. However, there are always exceptions to everything. On this day, when Wang Ling was observing the battle situation, under the large black area where the Allied forces headquarters was located, another group of troops drove out, surrounded by a base vehicle, and rushed straight into the 10 in Area 1. Stay stationed. Remember to eat, not to fight. In response, Wang Ling could only sneer repeatedly, and was already planning to lead the apocalypse tank to continue to cook one pot at a time. However, before he could take action, Tanya suddenly jumped out of the command post. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1013. Tanya. After seeing Agent Tanya, Wang Ling did not take action immediately. Instead, he stared at the electronic video and smiled playfully. It turns out that this girl has been hiding in the headquarters before. I wonder why there is no news from all areas. Hey, she is already in China, General. Your improvement is not slow. Now that you are entering the battlefield, do you have any plans, or are you looking for death? Team leader, this is a good opportunity to kill Tanya and avenge the instructor. It was okay to unite before, but now we are on opposite sides. It is only natural for us to kill Tanya, and the Allies can't do anything to us. When he had nothing to do, Wang Ling stayed in the temporary command post. Li Tong and Gu Suanwu, as well as the 2 deputies of the former General Luo were always by his side. Naturally, they also saw Agent Tanya. Li Tong and Gu Suanwu couldn't help but gnashed their teeth. They and Wang Ling were both comrades in the military camp, had the same instructor, and were very hostile to Tanya. When they went to the police dog training base to recall Wang Ling, these 2 were also in the queue. But unlike Wang Ling, they watched the instructor being killed with their own eyes, and their hatred for Tanya was even worse than Wang Ling's. In the previous alliance, Agent Tanya had only shown kindness to Wang Ling, but these 2 people had absolutely no sympathy for Tanya. Now that I see Tanya, I naturally want to eliminate this enemy as soon as possible. But the 2 deputies of General Luo were relatively calm. General Wang Ling, before our 2 armies joined forces, you 2 have been cooperating for a long time and have a certain friendship. Now I ask you to kill Tanya, can you do it? Li Tong and Gu Suanwu were silent for a moment, then turned to look at Wang Ling, with a hint of nervousness and expectation in their expressions. And Wang Ling did not disappoint them. He smiled very casually, Why can't we take action? Now we are in hostile camps. The Allies have already hit us. Do I have any reason to be soft? What's more? At this point, Wang Ling's face actually turned gloomy. I will always bear in mind the instructor's hatred. Huh, as soon as these words came out, Li Tong and Gu Suanwu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Wang Ling had not forgotten this grudge. General, Tanya has made a move. Just as he said this, another deputy reported quickly, and everyone hurriedly looked at the electronic video. Sure enough, they found that Tanya was behaving strangely, and ran straight into the army of multifunctional infantry vehicles and got into one of them. Afterwards, more than 20 multifunctional infantry vehicles collectively drove out of the base and rushed straight towards the 10th District Coalition position next door. What does she want to do? Li Tong asked. Gu Suanwu was also analyzing. Those multifunctional infantry vehicles are not in air defense form. They all seem to be filled with soldiers. It's just hard to tell what kind of arms are inside. General Luo Er's two deputies were also analyzing. It shouldn't be simple. Tanya is also inside. She will not seek death easily. Look at the direction, they are heading towards District 10. Are they planning a surprise attack? After all, Tanya's actions this time were really weird, and after much discussion, the four deputies couldn't guess her purpose. Wang Ling saved the trouble. Whatever, it's definitely not a good thing. With more than 20 multi-purpose infantry vehicles trying to attack the base, Tanya is really crazy. Instead of leaving her to District 10, it's better to let me kill her with your own hands. Team leader, just to be on the safe side, it's better to take us with you and bring some apocalypse tanks. Gu Suanwu was a little worried. But Wang Ling smiled and said, that's not necessary. Tanya is no match for me. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that Tanya must be relying on something for this action, otherwise she would not dare to attack the coalition base with this formation. However, Wang Ling didn't care. He was a very brave man. Even if Tanya shot at him personally, he wouldn't be able to kill him with a few shots. Instead, he would kill him in return. Even the infantry killer agent Tanya is no match for Wang Ling, so what should Wang Ling be afraid of? Whoosh! Just do what you said. As soon as he finished speaking, the other four people didn't have time to refute. Wang Ling had already moved out of the temporary paper shelter through time and space, blocking the attack route of Tanya's troops. Such a murderous god suddenly broke into the road halfway. It stands to reason that ordinary Allied troops would be frightened when they saw it, and they would quickly run away. But Tanya's troops seemed to be particularly aggressive. After approaching Wang Ling, they still charged towards him without fear of death. Da-da-da-da-da. Boom. 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 Wang Ling was not polite. He raised his gun and started shooting. The multifunctional infantry vehicles that entered his range exploded in series. Whoosh. Whoosh whoosh. However, this also stung a hornet's nest. It turned out that these multifunctional infantry vehicles were all equipped with Chrono Legion soldiers. After the infantry vehicle exploded, this group of Chaos Legion soldiers immediately appeared and quickly charged towards Wang Ling on a large scale. Damn it! This sudden situation immediately disrupted Wang Ling's rhythm. He quickly turned his gun and gave priority to the Chrono Legion soldiers trying to get close to him. Whoosh! Whizzing! However, the movements of the Chrono Legion soldiers were too fast. Wang Ling only had time to kill more than 10 people due to mental calculations. The remaining Chrono Legion soldiers had already approached Wang Ling, and then directly launched the Chrono Wave. Control Wang Ling. The attack method of the Chrono Legionnaire is very unique. Sometimes it is useless, but after being controlled, it is very deadly, because after being controlled by the Chrono Light Wave, no matter what unit, it can no longer move, even if it is as strong as the king. Ling has also become a lamb to be slaughtered. In order to ensure that the Allied forces could eliminate this murderous god at once, several more Chrono Legion soldiers rushed forward, and several light waves were superimposed on him. There were even some Chrono Corps soldiers who didn't even have time to get out of the vehicle, so they used Chrono light waves in the multifunctional infantry vehicle for additional control. After all the Chrono Legion soldiers launched their attack, Tanya jumped out of the infantry vehicle at the rear. However, Wang Ling was accused, and his life and death were on the line. As a hostile force, Agent Tanya was not happy at all. She looked at Wang Ling and even complained, "Are you stupid? Can't you see that this is phishing? You can obviously guess that this is a trap set against you, but you still insist on taking the bait. Do you really hate me so much?" In fact, if Agent Tanya drew his gun and fired at this time, Wang Ling would have no way to survive. However, Agent Tanya couldn't draw her twin guns. Facing Wang Ling, she couldn't show any hostility at all. In terms of stance, she is far inferior to General William. Of course, even if Agent Tanya didn't go for the last hit, Wang Ling's situation would still be very dangerous. The greater the control of chronospace light waves, the more limited the time the controlled unit can resist. Even if Wang Ling's body is strong and perverted, he cannot resist the concentrated control of such a group of Chronospace Legion soldiers for too long. Not long after Agent Tanya complained, a swish sound was heard, and Wang Ling was erased from the Red Alert world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1014. Very good. Good. Pretty. Ha ha ha, Wang Ling has completely disappeared now. The coalition forces have lost this god of killing, and we have laser UFOs to assist us. I wonder what else the coalition forces can use against us. This fishing plan is wonderful. William, you are the first to get rid of Wang Ling. Ha ha ha, I'm not the top one yet, Tanya is. If it weren't for Tanya, no one else would be able to catch this big fish like Wang Ling. Hey, I'm being modest. If it weren't for your plan, Tanya wouldn't be Wang Ling's opponent. As Wang Ling was wiped out by the space-time light wave, the entire Red Alert world seemed to be boiling, and almost all the Allied commanders were shouting excitedly. After all, the pressure Wang Ling brought to them was so great that they were almost breathless. In the headquarters, General Bob, General William, and the other generals were all applauding and even talking about it. Although the battle for hegemony that had begun again was not over yet, by getting rid of Wang Ling in advance, they had already won half of this battle. Soldiers never tire of deception. If Wang Ling was killed, he could only deserve it. Wang Ling. On the other hand, the coalition forces were even more shaken up and down. In almost every base, from the commander to the ordinary infantry, there was a buzz in their heads. In the general command post, PoortoRich even shouted hysterically, and everyone else looked like their eyes were broken. As a hero of the coalition, Wang Ling is the most powerful infantry in the entire coalition. His combat power can even hold up half of the coalition's sky. The sudden plan of the Allies to deceive Wang Ling is like destroying half of the coalition's sky. To them, one can imagine the magnitude of the blow. Team Leader. General. Allies, I'm going to kill your grandma. You're looking for death. Give us back the team leader. Allies, at #UN% go to hell. The generals in the general headquarters and even the officers and soldiers in other districts were sad and upset, let alone Wang Ling's subordinates. Now everyone has been blinded by anger and blinded by hatred. Everyone is cursing, and headed by Sun Dehua, Chen Tong, Sun Chiming and others, the troops have even begun to gather, preparing for a massive counterattack to give Wang Ling revenge was taken. If General Li Wiki were here, he would definitely suppress his grief and suppress the troops. The more this situation happens, the more calm he must be. But the key point is that the commander now is General Luo Er. His approach is completely opposite to that of General Li Wiki. Others rioted, and General Luo Er was also anxious. Large troops gathered. Instead of stopping him, he urged him, "Hurry up, come on, haven't you eaten yet? Assemble me immediately. No one from the 4 field groups is allowed to be left behind. Get all the armored units. Stop working on the armed mining trucks. Assemble me immediately. You son of a bitch. The allies are looking for death, so let me kill this bastard. Luo Er, what are you doing? Calm down. No one wants to see this kind of scene now, but you must stay calm and don't bury the rest of the people in it. Luo Er, what are you doing, you bastard? Don't be so impulsive." District 11 was in turmoil, and the 4 field teams quickly assembled. The momentum was so huge that it was difficult not to attract attention. As a result, the commanders of other districts started radioing to warn General Luo Er. Even PoortoRich was affected by the action shocked him and warned him not to use troops indiscriminately. The last time Wang Ling was betrayed, General Luo Er might have had the intention to stop his dog group troops from being impulsive, but now Wang Ling is his partner and subordinate. After he was killed, no one could persuade him, despite all the pressure they are even urging the troops to dispatch as soon as possible. Under such urging, the entire lineup of the 4 major field groups quickly assembled, launched an unprecedented ferocious offensive in the direction of Tanya, and quickly rushed over. Is this the place you came to after being erased by the space-time light wave? In fact, being erased by the superdimensional light wave does not mean that it is killed, but that it is forcibly moved to an alien space. While the 4 field teams were fighting back frantically, Wang Ling had already landed in that alien space, standing on a continent similar to a meteorite suspended in the universe, looking around in confusion and curiosity. This space is generally dark, illuminated only by the faint light of stars from the distance. However, Wang Ling has night vision ability, and the darkness cannot stop him from snooping. After scanning, Wang Ling could find that the meteorite continent he was standing on was not too large. It was only the size of a medium-sized city in the red alert world. It was full of pits and was very uneven. The most peculiar thing is that there are still armored troops on this meteorite continent. These armored troops had all been wiped out by hyperspace light waves. They were distributed over a wide area, but their numbers were not large. Moreover, because the gravity on this meteorite continent is very weak, when Wang Ling watched, there were even many tanks and vehicles that were floating and falling downward at a very slow speed. Oh! Surprised, Wang Ling was about to sigh, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he suddenly felt a strong sense of suffocation. Yes, this space is different from the red alert world. There is no air in it, and normal people cannot breathe at all. So when you look around, all you see are armored troops. The infantry may have died of suffocation long ago. However, Wang Ling was not worried about this desperate situation. He suddenly transformed and his body was covered with the battle uniform of a super-dimension Legion soldier, breathing happily inside the closed battle suit. He is a player himself, and can use the system's privileges to switch arms and uniforms. For example, the uniforms of the Chrono Legionnaires, rocket flying soldiers and air defense infantry are all sealed, and there is air inside for him to breathe. When the oxygen is exhausted, he can continue to convert, endless replenishment. Boom! Just as Wang Ling was fully experiencing the pleasure of breathing, a cannon shot suddenly sounded in the distance, attracting his attention. Turning his head to look, he saw that it was a floating rhino tank. When it fell, the angle of the gun barrel happened to be aimed at a tornado tank of the Soul Empire, and it hit it with one shot. However, this shot failed to kill the tornado tank. The powerful recoil even pushed the rhino tank to float backwards in an exaggerated manner, and it was about to fly out of the meteorite continent. Whoosh! However, Wang Ling suddenly moved across time and space to the root of the tornado tank, forcibly blocked it, switched to rocket pilots, and pushed it back to the ground. The unique setting of the Red Alert world. The armored units are all independent individuals. Although they cannot speak, they actually have their own perspective. Now I see a general from the coalition forces suddenly appearing here and saving it back to the ground. It actually kept shaking the barrel, as if to express its surprise. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 1015. In fact, the most surprising thing was not the Rhino tank, but Wang Ling. When I first arrived in this alien space, I looked up and saw these armored troops. I thought they had lost their vitality, but unexpectedly, these armored troops were still alive and still fighting here. Whenever conditions allowed, they would attack the enemy camp. The tanks fired. Although in the Red Alert world, Wang Ling's affection for the armored troops was far less profound than that of the infantry, but seeing the tanks of his own camp not forgetting to fight even in desperate situations, it was unavoidable that he felt touched in his heart. When the Rhino tank shook its barrel, he slowly walked to the front and gave a military salute to the Rhino tank, expressing his inner respect. After the ceremony, Wang Ling looked around again. In this space, there is no satellite signal and the electronic map cannot be used, but fortunately the field of view is very wide. With Wang Ling's eyesight, he can scan the entire meteorite continent at a glance and have a panoramic view of all the remaining armored units on the continent. Whoosh! Relying on his convenient movement, Wang Ling arrived at the nearest Rhino tank in the blink of an eye and checked it out. Although the appearance of this Rhino tank is relatively complete, it is unknown how long it has been in this place, and there are still signs of being shelled. Now it has no vitality. Well. Whoosh! Wang Ling had nothing to do about it. After sighing, he moved to the next location through time and space. Whoosh! Whoosh! After all, the area of this meteorite continent is limited, and there are not many coalition armored forces on it. Wang Ling simply moved through time and space one by one, checking the status of all the tanks one by one, and removed the armored forces that still had vitality and combat effectiveness. All in one place. However, in the end, only 3 of them could continue to fight, and the rest were either damaged or drifted away from the continent, and no trace of them could be seen at all. However, Wang Ling was quite pleasantly surprised that some armored troops could still be assembled in this strange space, and one of the 3 Rhino tanks had reached the elite level, which was even more unexpected. Looking at these 3 Rhino tanks, Wang Ling was also quite pleased. After sighing, he looked up at the dark starry sky. To be honest, although Wang Ling came to this space for the first time, he was not completely unfamiliar. When he was promoted to the Soldier King level as a member of the Chrono Space Corps, he had traveled through this space subconsciously, and he actually had a certain understanding of the general appearance here. And the most important thing is that Wang Ling had felt at that time that he had a certain connection with this space world, so when he learned that he had entered this alien space by mistake, Wang Ling did not worry too much. After pondering for a while, Wang Ling suddenly released a space-time fluctuation circle and enveloped the 3 Rhino tanks. At this moment, Wang Ling could clearly feel that by injecting his time-space light wave attack into this wave circle, he could leave here at any time and return to the Red Alert world. However, after learning the result, Wang Ling did not implement it immediately. Instead, he immediately withdrew the space-time fluctuation circle. After moving his cervical spine, Wang Ling looked at his hands and smiled slyly. I can only go out from here, but I can't take the initiative to come in, which is a pity. But it doesn't matter, I'm here anyway. I have to collect some interest and go back. Hey hey. Whoosh. Choo choo choo. Choo choo choo. Just do what he said. Wang Ling had just made up his mind and had already started to implement it. With a movement through time and space, he came to the sky above the tornado tank that had just been bombarded. he switched to rocket pilots and started shooting at high altitude. A series of violent boom blasted it. Whoosh! Choo choo choo! Choo choo choo! Afterwards, Wang Ling continued to shift positions and took up other tornado tanks. In fact, for Wang Ling, entering this alien space this time is neither a good thing nor a good thing. Previously, due to time travel, his rocket pilot level was passively lowered, and subsequent battles always tended to be fast battles, unable to effectively gain experience. This has always been Wang Ling's regret. After all, in the real world, Wang Ling is very eager for flying skills. But now in the alien space, there are many armored troops here who were wiped out from the Soul Empire. If we don't take this opportunity to brush up on the experience of the troops, wouldn't it be a waste of resources? Due to the environment here, the combat effectiveness of the tornado tank is severely limited, but Wang Ling doesn't care at all. Whether it is a rocket pilot or a Super Space Legion soldier, it allows him to fight and move in this space unscrupulously. With the help of this convenience, Wang Ling quickly swept away all the Gust tanks on the entire Meteor continent. Regardless of whether they had vitality or not, they all became Wang Ling's targets. But how big is this continent? The Gale tanks scattered above were very sparse, and even after beating them all, Wang Ling was not able to gain much experience. But it doesn't matter. In this alien space, there are many meteorite continents like this, ranging in size. Some meteorite continents are as big as an island. In joint operations, the coalition and allied forces could wipe out many armored units of the Soul Empire, which was enough for Wang Ling to reach the level of King of Soldiers in no time. After sweeping through the enemy forces on this continent, Wang Ling immediately turned his attention to the next continent. Wang Ling was not sure how big the alien space was. The meteorite continents here were far apart from each other, and Wang Ling's spiritual power could not reach them at all. However, his line of sight was not blocked, and Wang Ling had no trouble selecting the moving coordinates. Wang Ling did not carry the 3 Rhino tanks together. He moved his position alone and started sweeping across the next continent. Naturally, the Mind Empire troops wiped out by the 2 armies were not only Gust tanks, but also many Get tanks, magneto-electric tanks, mind control vehicles, and even individual buildings, all of which were moved to this space. Became the target of Wang Ling's attack. The Getter tank poses a huge threat to him, but Wang Ling can destroy it in advance and then brush the tank without any damage, which is very efficient. While gaining experience, Wang Ling also encountered allied armored forces. Some of these were erased by the Hyperspace Legion soldiers exchanged by the coalition forces during previous battles, and Wang Ling didn't know where the other part came from. But that didn't matter, Wang Ling didn't care. Now that the 2 armies were hostile, Wang Ling didn't let these armored units go, and blasted them all happily. After every time he swept across a continent, Wang Ling would individually check the coalition forces on the continent and gather together all the armored units that still had vitality. Although the overall number is not large, it is better than nothing. When all the troops on the continent are gathered together, it is still a strong fighting force. In the alien space, there is no concept of time. Wang Ling didn't know how long he had been fighting and how many continents he had swept across. When he was a little numb, the rocket pilot's level finally broke through to the level of the 10-star Soldier King.